Hey, friends, welcome to episode 460 of the My 123 Cents podcast. This week it is two is greater than one, and joining me via Zoom, my good buddy Tyler Heath Hatton. And Heath, I can't, and I don't know how deep in the woods we want to go here, but over the past couple of weeks, there's been a lot of local to Southern Illinois, uh, independent wrestling talk going on, and we're seeing some new companies emerge, which begs the question, what's going on with Stride Pro Wrestling?
Uh, you know, it's the more wrestling companies I feel like out there, we've talked before, I feel like the better.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think it gives more people a place to work. I've had a lot of people reach out and ask, and basically, I'm gonna Cody Rhodes it, and kind of give a Cody Rhodes answer. Um, it was honestly just time for Stride to be done.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't there. You weren't there anymore. Sam wasn't there. And it was just time. And I felt like Stride was always going to be attached to my name, no matter what.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
People just no matter what it was, and regardless of what people say or what people think, I'm not a vindictive person, and so I don't feel like it was really ever going to be fair to anybody else that took that over, because it was always going to be, attached to my name. I started Stride for one reason and one reason only. I'd like to sit up here and be super baby face and say I started it to give the fans of Southern Illinois a wrestling, and that wasn't it. We've talked probably 50 times on here. Stride was started because there was another company running here and they wouldn't book my friends. So that's the only reason that Stride was ever started.
Mhm.
I wanted to give my friends a place to wrestle close to home whenever they wanted. I wanted to give them a building they could go to whenever they wanted. And I wanted them to have a place to where they could wrestle and get home and see their family, especially me. I had just came off of, traveling every weekend, gone, and that's what I wanted. And and my daughter's gotten older and I couldn't do it. A lot of people don't know this. I've never said it publicly. I got offered, back in May. I got offered $5,000 for Stride. Somebody offered to pay me $5,000. I turned it down. I can send the screenshots. They sent back and they offered me $8,000
Wow.
for Stride. Um, and basically they just wanted all the stuff and everything. Most people don't know this. I never sold Stride. I never really felt like there was anything to sell. I mean, honestly, you own different parts of it. Sam owned different parts of it. I own different parts of it. Red Daniels owned different parts of it. It was kind of just a community of me and all my friends.
Right.
And I wanted it, like I said, going back, that's why I started Stride, was to give my friends. In real life, me, people know me. I'm a very loyal. So I take pride in being a good friend, being loyal, being there for people I care about. If you trained under me or you wrestled for me, I went to bat for you. I got more pleasure out of seeing you succeed than I did myself.
Sure.
That is not a good quality to have in professional wrestling.
Right.
It's not.
Right.
You have to have an ego. You have to be self-centered a little bit. You kind of have, a lot of times guys backstab, and I never fit into that mold. And that's not me saying anything. That I don't fit into that mold.
Right.
And I felt like I wanted Stride to stay that way. And with that being said, also as a booker, I got more excited booking for other people. Um, if I was champ, I was finding a way to book myself out of that. If I was in the main event, I was finding a way to book myself out of that. I mean, I booked myself to be in a tag team with a news anchor. I mean, I was constantly trying to find different ways, to put other people over. I can remember me and Billy Hills arguing because I was champ and he wanted me to pin him and I didn't want to pin him. And same thing we just talked about, like with you. I didn't tell you I was going to pin you. I was very much, I like telling stories for other people. And I don't feel like that was happening anymore. And that's the way the wrestling is. Most of the time you go to a booker, it's their way or the highway. It's their story, what they want. You don't get a say. And a lot of guys want that, do that. And I wasn't that way. I was going to talk. I was going to take your idea. So that wasn't, going on anymore. And then also, just different philosophies. People just have different philosophies, different way that things are going to be ran. And there is nothing wrong with that. I have no heat, no problem. I've been backstabbed and lied to before. Things have been said about me before that weren't true. I don't hold grudges. And I want to see people succeed, but it's not the way I envisioned Stride. And I didn't want to see it be any other way. I could have sold it and made money. I didn't, but I felt it was just better. You know what? Let somebody else do something. Let them do their own way. There's a lot of rumors people have said that just frankly aren't true. There was never a LLC, and there was never anything where I was being cut out. I was very helpful. I mean, me and you both. How many times in the last 3 months did me and you call trying to find a building for Stride to stay?
Sure.
I mean, I actually went and looked at one and talked to a guy. So there was never anything bitter or anything like those were just made up stories. But we wish everybody well. Stride, I have 2 school shows I'm going to be doing that I had booked, and I'm going to run it under Stride. So that I had already in the pipeline. So that's it. There's no drama. There's no nothing. Just, sometimes, you have different philosophies. You see things differently than other people. Some people don't view you the same way as a friend or as you view them. It's just the way it is. I mean, and that's what happened with Stride. So I wanted to kind of clear the air. I've had so many people message me and call. I've had wrestlers call me and tell me they're loyal to me. They won't work for other companies. That's not, I wish everybody well. I really hope, we offered to promote their show on the Stride page. I will do anything I can to. I love professional wrestling. So I want to see everybody succeed, no matter what company it is. I mean, we're talking about launching a My 123 Cents wrestling company, where, you already asked to order a championship belt. You're going to be the champ. Chad's going to be the Intercontinental champ. And, so, I mean, we wish everybody well. It wasn't working out. My views are my views, right or wrong. They might be wrong, and they very well could be. My formula is what worked for Stride. Somebody else needs to find a new formula and see if that works for them. And we wish them all the best. No hard feelings. I view things differently in the wrestling world. When I made a mistake, I called and said, "Hey, I'm sorry. I made a mistake." And that's not a good quality. Like I said, that's not a good quality to have in wrestling. And it's got me a few times. But I have no regrets in the way that I've done Stride, the way I've handled myself in wrestling. It's got me to go a lot of cool places. I mean, look at this mark behind me. Look at all that stuff. So kudos to Stride. It was a great run.
It was a great run, 7+ years, over $100,000 raised for charities. Lots of good things that came out of Stride, the friendships that came about. And again, I'm eternally grateful to have been, just to do the announcing was one thing, but then the other aspects and actually getting in the ring a handful of more times too. was something that I'll never forget, and people still ask me about to this day. So, we had talked about doing this a while back, and we're going to kind of do like an all-time uh, Stride top 10, if you will. And we put it out there on the Stride Pro Wrestling Facebook page, which we will keep active. Tyler and I will post on it from time to time. So continue to follow and stick around there. And Tyler mentioned a couple of school fundraisers coming up. So check that page for more information on those events as well. But you wanna start us off with your number 10? And
So
again,
yeah, so
this becomes hard because it's easier when I do a list of wrestlers that I've never met, that I've not been friends with, that I've not shared the ring with or been in the locker room with. So this is going to be challenging, and I'm going to put it out on my behalf, and I'm sure Tyler feels the same way. Again, this is this is like trying to pick a favorite kid in some instances, because there were so many great talents that came through Stride and that were part of Stride. So there's nothing personal on my list at all. I'm not overlooking anyone intentionally or keeping anyone off. Lots of great talent that was there, that worked hard to train, especially the trainees that came through. Kudos to all of them as well.
I always felt like, I feel like this now with Stride. I feel like there's two different levels to me for
Mhm.
Stride. There is pre-COVID and post-COVID. I feel like the roster pre-COVID was completely different than the roster post-COVID. So my list was very difficult because, like, even talking to like different people about their lists and people that message me or text, they were like, "Oh, this person," and I'm like, "Well," and I'd say this person, they'd be like, "Well, like a Peyton Ayers or whatever that they didn't have pre, but was such a great talent and such a top talent." So anyway, yeah, I'll get started.
Yeah.
First off, before I even hit my list, guys like Farmer Billy Hills, Chris Hargis, Josh Totten, Stephen Davis, Joey O'Reilly, Jay Wellington Beauregard, A.T. Brooks, Scott Phoenix, Shane Rich. Those are guys that didn't make my list, but are so important to the success of Stride. Like, I look at, back in the 90s, like the Val Venuses and the Gold Dust and the X-Pacs and even the Edge and Christians. They were crucial to the success of WWF beating WCW in the war. So those guys, like, again, Farmer Billy Hills is pretty much, he was the guy I was trying to get booked for the other company that he wouldn't let me bring in. So starting Stride, I mean, really, he was probably the one guy that I wanted to book. So, and then also, I hate to say this, but I didn't put you as a top 10 wrestler
Well,
of
good.
Stride.
I should not
Um,
be. Some people did.
but
No.
and so but no, like, you and Sam, I mean, I kind of felt like me, you, Sam, and Red Daniels were like the four horsemen, where we did so much behind the scenes for so many years. I mean, without you running the Stride page and promoting, and I mean, just, when you weren't at a Stride show, it sucked, because I had to do everything that, like, you just handled so much stuff that, you know, promoting the next show and leading up to matches, and you handled all that I didn't have to. And then Sam doing a lot of the taking pictures of the
Mhm.
talent and helping Jim with the music and all that. So all those are just, they were crucial. Like, there wasn't a person that wasn't. But my number 10, I had Jerry Travelstead as number 10 on my list. I think one of my favorite matches was him and his kids versus Dexter Roswell. That was probably one of my favorite matches that Stride ever had. I got to produce that match. I guess produce. I got to help put it together and lay it out, and putting Jerry through a table, and then Dexter adding what he thought the kids could do. I really enjoyed that, but I felt like 204 shows put us on the map. We
Mhm.
were doing really good at the mall, but that was like our spectacle, our spectacular, and doing the legacy ladder match, and just and the first real story I feel like that captivated everybody was Tony Flood and the Mask with Jerry Travelstead. And, like, so I think Jerry was, he wasn't a teacher. He actually came and learned how to wrestle. He
Yeah.
trained. He came to the school and trained. He went on the road. He worked for Burt Prentice. He came and tagged with me there. He came to Stride and he learned how to wrestle. And he was a draw. People paid to see him. There was T-Dog shirts everywhere. I'm very thankful for him. And he learned how to wrestle and he understood. He had watched wrestling long enough and he knew how to tell a story and he knew how to entertain.
Yeah, Jerry is my number 10 as well. And
Huh.
he was, like you said, all of those things that you said, but I always felt like when we did a show in Pinckneyville, he did that extra for it, with kind of the Titantron-esque entrances. The night that I wrestled Roger, he had the band kids playing Roger had that really cool entrance. And then last year when Jerry had his last match, it was the night of the casket match with you and Cash, but Jerry and Tony did a 3 falls, and each fall had a different stipulation, and he always was very meticulous and doing extra, and not just for himself and his matches, which was part of it, but like I said, the construction of that casket for the casket match and those extra things that he did, and very philanthropical in his approach as well, wanting to give back and raise money for storm victims or raise money for programs at his school and in his community. So giving back was a big part of him, and I appreciated that as well.
My number 9 is Dexter Roswell. Dexter Roswell, the political character.
Yeah.
I really feel like nothing take away from him. He brought that character to life. That was probably my Undertaker character. I came up with that at practice. I really wanted him. He was wrestling under a different persona that we were able to bring later on, but I felt like that didn't fit him. I didn't fit his personality. He wasn't able to dig into that character, and people, come on, people, they weren't buying that. And I came up, Donald Trump was running for office, and I got that idea of him, and he played it perfect. And I had told, just the other day I was talking to Red Daniels, and I told him I felt like Dexter Roswell and Brian Richards could have took that show on the road. I mean,
Yeah.
some of the best stories we ever told were with them two playing off each other. And not to take away from the Bloody Dexter character,
Yeah.
I never I never understood that character. Like I never I tried my best to tell a story with it. The presentation was awesome. Just a great when he walks out, you're like, well, that is awesome. But as far as what the character is, it could never be explained to me. But the Dexter Roswell political character, it was just some of the best stuff. I mean, that was like, I loved it. I loved all the stuff there at the DR party. It was the matches, like I said, with Jerry. It was a really good character, and it was a lot of fun to book, and to bounce that stuff, not off Brian Richards and off everybody that was in the DR party, and Scott Phoenix coming in and them having a tag team run, and it was just it was a lot of fun to tell that story with the DR party. It was, as far as character wise and development wise, it was the best character and persona that I think came out of the Stride Pro Wrestling School, by far.
I agree, and Dexter's on my list too, but he's number 7 on mine. But all for the same reasons that you mentioned. I loved that early incarnation of it, and I think it also, that evolution, like especially the guys that were coming in, because Stride was very unique in that we had a group of established independent wrestlers that were coming in, that some that had worked on a much bigger stage, obviously, and then others that were green as grass and coming in and training, and Dexter was one of those, as Luke Chambers in those early days. And then it was something, and I remember it very distinctly. It was the December 2016 Stride show that, this was a month after Trump was elected. And I know that the character was in development and whatnot, but that music would hit, and introducing him from Springfield, and he's a politician and folks here in Southern Illinois, don't take very kindly to Springfield and to politicians and politics. So it was like a natural heel coming out there, and he was smug and cocky, and then the DR party kind of growing and whatnot. It was a fun journey to watch it. And I'm not too far off on your thoughts with the Bloody Dexter. Again, the presentation was great, but there were times that I wondered, and then I did like when he was interspersing and doing Luke Chambers one month, and then he'd come out as Dexter, the politician, and then as Dexter, as Bloody Dexter. So a cool look and whatnot. And I know that those suits and stuff, it can't be easy to wrestle in, but I feel like that was a character, like you said, that was one of those originals, a Stride original, if you will. And I thought that it was really good. But my number 9, I guess I should say my number 9. I went with a tag team, and I kind of stole the idea from someone else, but I went with the Sin City Saints of Jay Spade and Tony Flood. And I could argue that both of these guys belong on this list as singles as well, and Jay may be on yours. I did them as a tag team though, and I would also, I could rotate Dalton Anthony in there too, because the wrestling buddies of Spade and Dalton were the longest reigning Stride Pro Wrestling Tag Team Champions. Again, this was kind of that post-COVID era of Stride, but again, they worked well together. But I thought that Spade and Flood worked. They did their feud early on in Stride, and then they came together as a tag team. And you and I, of course, had our match with them. But there was something about, when I think of great tag teams coming out of Stride, Sin City Saints, because Stride wasn't necessarily a quote unquote tag team territory, but with Spade and Flood in there as a team, I really, really liked what they did.
Yeah, and I mean, and they put us over, a couple times, so that always helps. I mean, they were, able to pull something out of you, and so, but no, I mean, I definitely agree. I'm not going to talk about them; they're on my list, so I'll talk about them more individually. But as a tag team, they were great. My number 8, I had Riser as my number 8. Certain people I learned this at WWE. William Regal has said this one time. There are people that hit moves and they know how to hit moves, and then there's people that know how to wrestle. Riser knew how to wrestle.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is, he understood how to tell a story in the ring. He understood how to listen to a crowd, and he knew when to hit moves. It's like John Cena. John Cena is not the best technical wrestler, and I'm not comparing Riser to John Cena. So calm down, Hunter Woodworth. So but what I'm saying is just certain people understand. I wouldn't say I'm a great technical wrestler, but I always knew how to listen to a crowd, and I always knew okay, how to get a reaction. And that's why I was always able to get booked. And so Riser was that way. Everywhere he went, people moved him up the card fast. I mean, SICW was begging to have him come in because he just understood how to wrestle. He understood how to get a reaction out of a crowd. And when we started making this list, I have a notebook that I kept. And when I first started Stride, I was completely stupid and clueless, but I wanted to be able to prove to people. So I kept a track of the main event stories and who, the crowd sizes and how much money we profited, or how much, this. And I quit right after COVID, and I wish I would have kept it going, but I really didn't care anymore. And anyway, Riser produced money when he was at the top. He was a champ that produced money. People paid to see him, and and he trained at the school, and he just got it. And I think the world of him, not only as a wrestler but as a person. But he was in me and your storyline, and he was fantastic. I mean, he absolutely he got it, and he understood, and I think he's one of the greats that ever came through Stride.
I'm going to save him because he's later on my list. But my number 8 is Peyton Ayers. And I know that you talked about pre and post COVID, and I felt like Peyton came in, and in the beginning, you know, he was kind of that heater four riser, and was not. I wasn't sure, you know, where he was going to go. He's another big guy, but you know, I, I guess I'm combining some of that Peyton Ayers, the person who Peyton is his real name, versus the wrestler as well. And you know, over the past, you know, saw him kind of growing and developing and getting in there with guys like Shane Rich and with you and with Roger Mathis and Axel. You know, these guys all helped him along the way, and I think that he's one of those guys, like you said, that sponge that absorbed it and took with it and came in there. Probably, you know, behind the scenes, very soft spoken, teddy bear like, not. And I know he was trying to come off as this nasty heel bad guy, and putting Sam with him as the mouthpiece there for a little bit was good. But I just witnessing him kind of grow and develop and get it was fun for me. And so I always have time for him and think that he is a really was always a great addition. And watching him, he's one of those that, like you said, he came here and trained, and then you see him, and I know he worked some in Cape as well, but he's expanded. He's up at SICW. He's, you know, going south and wrestling with Golden Boys promotion and doing things all over the kind of Midwest, you know, this area. So I am happy and proud of his success. Proud for his success.
So he's my number 7. So
Okay.
I'll just go ahead and keep it rolling with Peyton. I will say this, and this is not an insult to anybody else, because there's some greats. I feel like Peyton is the best trainee to ever come through Stride. And what I mean by that is he has it all: the height, the weight, the look, but he also understands how to wrestle.
Yeah.
And he's the nicest guy in the world. I've never heard him say a bad thing in the world ever. I mean, just, okay, yes, what do you need? I mean, like, you know, the kid still sends me videos and stuff for me to watch, and, you know, and just feedback and what I think. And, you know, he is somebody who I feel like, and I really believe this, he'll get to WWE one day. Will he get signed? Will he make, you know, I don't know, but he'll be there. He'll get to do extra work, but he'll get a look because he's a good looking kid and he understands wrestling, but also, like, has no arrogance about him. So many guys, and they have egos when they shouldn't have egos. I mean, me and Axe had an hour conversation the other night about guys that are just, you know, I would rather work with a guy who's not as talented but humble and great than to work with a guy who has an ego and is not that, you know, is not that good. You know, I mean, if you're not that good and you have no ego, I could work with you. But if there's so many guys that they have egos and you're like, not even any good, you know. Peyton's not that way. He's humble. I mean, he is just the humblest guy, and he has talent, and he gets it, he understands it, he has a work ethic. You know, he works his butt off, and like you said, he's getting booked other places. You know, that was always, he's getting paid to work other places. That's always a big thing. I was never that guy that was going to drive 3 or 4 hours for $20. It was just never going to happen. You were going to pay me, or I wasn't going to go, because I couldn't take money away from my family. Peyton's getting paid to wrestle, which tells you a lot about him, you know. So yeah, he was my number 7, and yours was Dexter.
Yeah, my number 7 was Dexter. Yep.
So, and we talked about him. My number 6 is Jay Spade.
Okay.
I went Jay Spade. Again, somebody who I'm just partial to, you know, I mean, just regardless, I mean, my early days driving to Alney, anytime WWE brought me in for my private tryouts or whatever, I messaged Spade and we met up and wrestled. Because as far as wrestling, there's not too many people better as far as just taking moves, selling and stuff. And some of the best stories at AAPW, you know, him and Carnage, you know, he was involved in your thing with Mike Masters, you know, he's so versatile. He can do whatever. Him and, like you said, him and Dalton Anthony, the wrestling buddies, their backstage stuff we did during COVID was hilarious
Yeah.
and just and funny. You know, it was just great. Um, and you know, him and Roger, believe it or not, him and Roger's feud drew a lot of money for the company. Looking back at the form and the book, they drew a lot of money. They really produced. That was a great story. It was a great underdog story. Um, he drew a lot of money for the company when he was at the top, and he was in tag teams. He did a lot of, you know, he wore a mask, and I mean, he just did a lot of things, and he never questioned it. He never. You have guys that would get aggravated about stuff. He never did. He just trusted me. Okay, that sounds great. Let's do it. And he's just he's been a friend of mine since the day I walked in wrestling. You know, and you know, so I'm very, like I said, I'm loyal,
Yeah.
and I just think the world of.
Well, and as I mentioned, Spade was on my list in the tag team division, but all the things that you said, and I'll throw out this as well. I think it takes a very talented person to be able to successfully play a heel and a face. And Spade is one of those guys. It's a short list of guys on the independent scene that I've seen that is able to do it. And even you know, in WWE or WCW or AEW, you know, on the national stage, to me, it's a talent to be able to play both sides of the fence effectively and do it well. And I thought that Spade always did it. I loved his chicken shit heel stuff when he and Tony were the Sin City Saints, and you know,
Yeah.
that underdog baby face that was fighting that. You know, you very rarely clued me in on what was going to happen. And when Spade won the heavyweight title from Roger, you know, I mean, I was happy for him, surprised, and it was one of those things that it was like, this is the true success of an underdog story. You know, he worked hard, you know, in the tag team stuff with Joey O'Reilly early on when Stride first started, and then when Joey left and he kind of worked on his own and worked his way to that championship, and then feuded back and forth with Tony, and then forming the team with him, and then the team eventually with Dalton. It was all good stuff, and you know, you guys, anytime I felt like we were in a pinch for something, or we were doing a fundraiser show and it wasn't necessarily storyline driven, we throw the two of you in there against each other, and it made magic every single time. So yeah, Spade definitely a versatile part of and one of the MVPs of Stride in my opinion as well. So good pick there. My number 6 was let's see, where Red Daniels. Again, one of those early, actually the first graduate of the Stride Academy. I think him and Frank Edwards kind of went through and graduated together. But Red was one of those guys that you could always rely on. He was into it. You know, he and I would talk about marketing things and promotional things and things that we could do. It was his idea, or I don't know if it was his idea, but he and I worked together on the very first part of the YouTube channel early on when we were still out at the mall. He would come, we would meet at the mall, and he would bring his laptop and have matches on there, and then I would voice them over it for commentary, just trying to do something different to put Stride out there. And again, this was like circa 2017, maybe 2018. You know, and again, that behind the scenes work that people don't see. You know, he was integral in all of that. And the fans loved him. You know, he was a Carterville guy. He worked as a face and a heel. I think that he was more effective as a good guy. The fans loved him. And those pops that he would get that night he came back at Strideversary in 2019, I think it was, and cashed in and won the belt. You know, those are great memories that will last forever. And I think that he should be proud of his body of work and what he did to go on and help others train and kind of pass that torch, so to speak.
And I got him later on, so I'll talk about him
Okay.
later. Number 5, I got Roger Mathis. You know, I had Roger, just, you know, it should be known that when you wrestle Roger, you know, you're in a cage with him.
Yeah.
Anytime, and I always tell this story, like when you're in the ring with Roger, number one, like if he wanted to, he could kill you.
Oh yeah.
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's just, you know, if he wanted to, he could legit kill you. And so you have that, that's in the back of your mind. Now, would he? No, I mean, he is honestly, I know there's different opinions on different, he's a sweetheart. I mean,
Yeah.
he is, and I mean, people say that about Brock Lesnar, and people say that he's a jerk. To me, Roger's a sweetheart. He is. And so, but anyway, just, man, no matter what you gave him, he could play. When we needed him to be the monster, obviously, he could play that part. We needed him to put over a news anchor. He could play that part. We needed him to, beat up your 12-year-old daughter that the internet loved. He could do it.
Yeah.
And I mean, no matter what we gave him, he could do it. And he was always receptive. I mean, so many times he would do things I didn't like, and I could call him and have a conversation. I see your point, boss. That's what he would say. I'm sorry. Um, and he was just talented, and he had a lot of good runs as champ. And he just, one of my personal favorite matches of all time was a TLC match. So that was one of my favorite matches that I ever had. We had a lot of fun doing it. And then, just me and him got to go to South Bend to Hagstrom's place and wrestle together up, in South Bend. And I just, he is just one of those guys that no matter what you did, he could do anything, and it was always believable, because I mean, now today he's at a jiu-jitsu tournament. He's probably going to get first. He's more than likely going to kill somebody. I mean, so I mean, it's just when you have somebody that is legit, that to me it takes talent, to where if I punched him in real life, it's not gonna hurt him. But in a wrestling ring, when I punch him, he would sell it, and he would do that for me, and that goes a long way. When you have guys that will do that for you. So yeah, he was my number 5.
He's my number 5 as well. And when you talked about the match, I don't know if I've ever told this story, because this was in 2018, so Stride was 2 years old. And Roger was, I don't think Roger was an original, like he wasn't at the first couple of shows, but he eventually was there. And I remember just very like, because again, he's this big brooding guy, and I'm pretty introverted, believe it or not. And so I have trouble warming up to people, and that's something on my end. But I never really approached him much in the locker room. And also being the ring announcer, I'm only in the locker room at the very beginning, before the show starts, and then at the end when the show is over. So I don't have a whole lot of time to interact and talk to some of the wrestlers. If I didn't know them from AAPW, then I didn't, really know them that well. So Roger was one of those guys. And I always thought that he, like you said, he didn't like me. He was, whatever. And then when we did this angle, and when when my wife volunteered our daughter to be the one that gets power slammed by him, I couldn't think of, there's very few people on that roster at any time that I would have trusted with that. And obviously he was one of them. And we talked about it, and he explained it to her and showed her what was going to happen. But I was scared in that match. Not that I thought that he was going to snap and kill me, but someone did tell me, here's a safe word. If you feel like you are in danger, shout this, and I will help. Again, I'm not going to go into the details, but I was not 100% convinced that he wasn't going to kill me until it was all over with, and then we got backstage, and again, sweetheart of a guy, and getting to know him even better than after that. I feel like we bonded through that whole experience, on my end at least. So. And we would talk. He's been over here. We've done a podcast over here before, sharing a beer and doing things like that. So again, a legit tough guy, a family man, and someone who I felt like also knew the time was right for him to walk away and try something different, and he did that as well. So lots of love and respect for Roger, for sure.
My number 4 is Tony Flood. Tony Flood is somebody who I think it's a fantastic worker, just a really good wrestler, a really good worker. Some of my favorite stories that I ever told were with him. The largest gate that Stride ever had. School shows and stuff, they don't count because the school got that money.
Yeah.
The largest gate Stride ever had was Strideversary with me and Flood as Iron Man. We made the most money that's ever been made at Stride. And I mean, that was I hate to use the word stone cold, the shoot sell out. And me and Tony had, I remember we were at 204 school, and Jerry was in the main event, and me and Tony wrestled, and we were just middle card. We were actually doing something for the legacy. It was something where me and him, neither one had nothing going on, and we went and wrestled, and we got done, and Jerry goes, "You guys should have been the main event," and we were just goofing off out there. Tony was one of those guys. We never had to talk about anything.
Mm-hmm.
I knew what he wanted to do. He knew what I wanted to do. We would just talk. I mean, we never planned out spots. I mean, the Iron Man, I probably still have the sheet. We maybe had 4 things planned, 5 things planned for the Iron Man. And the rest of it, we just called. We knew each other. I think he respected me and what I could do, and I respected him. I always, wanted to put him over. He always wanted to put me over, and we clicked. And I mean, he, as far as wrestling wise, I mean, just there's not too many that are better. And just I loved working with him. I mean, I'd work him any day of the week. I know he left, Stride on some bad terms, and I hate it because I did. I considered him a friend. Just but other things happen. We talked about that earlier. But as far as talent, if anybody called and ever asked about Tony, I'd recommend him. He's fantastic, and he was crucial. Some of the best stories at Stride was the mask, him getting fired. I mean, no matter what I had him do, he made gold out of it. Him and Jerry's stuff, and I mean, crucial to the foundation of Stride.
I agree, and like I said, I had him in with Spade as the tag team, and one thing that I always, when I think of Tony Flood, I think of that night at 204 school, and one of the nights that he wrestled Jerry, and it was the ladder match, and I think you and Tony were also feuding at the time, but or it wasn't a ladder, it was like a Falls Count Anywhere match or a TLC. It was something, there was something was out there, and Tony did that moonsault and caught his head on that ladder, and I remember I was panicked, I was legit panicked, and I ran and found you, and then you came out, and and you knew that Tony was okay. I don't know how you knew this, but my thought was, this match is going to stop. We got to get him to the hospital and everything else, and you were taunting him because they eventually moved up to the ramp, and Tony went through, and that's how Jerry ended up winning the fall. But I remember, I can still see, and this was before we were recording shows, but you're over there eating popcorn and just razzing Tony, giving him a hard time. And I remember thinking, my God, this guy is gonna bleed to death. But he, it all worked out, and he eventually was, he was fine in the fact that he had to go and get stitches and might have had a concussion. But I just remember thinking, that dude is tough. And getting in there and continuing on with a match, props and mad respect to him. And then of course the stuff we did in the tag team stuff was fun as well. So lots of respect for Tony Flood as well.
Who's your number 4?
My number 4 is probably, in my opinion, I'm just thinking here, I think your greatest nemesis in Stride Pro Wrestling, and that is Cash Borden, or Cash. Cash was there. I don't think he was there at the very, very beginning. He might not have been at the first show, but he was there early on with Dalton Diamond, pardon me, and their tag team and what they were doing. There's something about Cash. I can't really put my finger on it because I do not like hardcore wrestling, quite honestly. It's not for me. Again, like I said earlier, everybody has their opinion and their taste. And for me, I never really got into that. But Cash came in with that hardcore mentality, but was able to cater it to our Stride audience. And there wasn't a lot of blood and guts and whatnot, but he would, like the way he would take a piece of paper and do like a paper cut in between your fingers, like those kinds of, like, I think he gets the psychology of it all. I know he gets the psychology of wrestling, and he can get in there and he can hold that crowd in his hands and really just kind of take everybody on a ride, myself included, as someone that's watching and calling the show. And I don't know, man. There's just something about him that I've always thought was he had kind of that it factor and a creative mind. And I know that there were times that you had to kind of pull the reins on him and say, "Wait, we can't do this," or you can't do a promo with this in it or whatever. But again, one of those guys that gets the marketing and the branding of that character and the forgotten and taking it to a new level. So lots of
So
respect.
he was so Cash was my number three.
Hmm.
My favorite person to ever tell a story with, because he is so creative.
Yeah.
We talked about him one time on the podcast before, but he he thought I didn't like him because he was a hardcore guy and all that. And I'm like you, I'm an introvert. I don't really watch wrestling, that much anymore. And I didn't really then. I would watch matches people would send me, but I wasn't into all the other stuff. And when I became a wrestler, it was hard to watch it as a fan.
Hmm.
I mean, I hate that, now because I don't have that. But anyway, I had, Cash. I watched him, and I would watch him at Strictly Insane, and he would just make me laugh, because he was so he would be, he does that thing where he throws his hands down and he screams, and he looks to me like Sirius Black on Harry Potter when he's screaming into the thing.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I could remember watching him one time, and I said, he reminds me of Sirius Black on Harry Potter, because he would scream like that, and then I would laugh. And he'd be wrestling somebody, and a fan would say something, and he would turn and just say something snappy to him, and it's like he was always one step ahead, and when you wrestled, he was always one step ahead, and he was just like, he was one of those ones we'd be brawling, and I would be thinking, roll me over. And then, he'd roll me over, and then I'd be like, I wish he'd bite me. And next thing I know, he's biting, and I mean, I never had to say it.
Yeah.
But, he was champ. He had all the belts, at one time. He
I
won
love
every single belt. And we had a thing called cashing in. And like you said, I had to rein him in. But that was the one thing I enjoyed about Stride. And I talked about it. He was one of the ones that I had talked to that he was struggling to get his ideas heard.
it. Hmm.
With me, he would, can I put real gasoline on the coffin and set it on fire? No, you Cash, you can't burn me alive, or it would be like, hey, I want to go out to this fan and I want to stab him in the leg with this knife, and it's like, no, okay, let's do this instead. I'm
Yeah.
exaggerating, but he would always have these really just outlandish ideas, and he would always work with me on how to tone it down and make it family friendly. And I never doubted that he was going, I'll tell you something about Cash. He came up to me and he asked me if he could say the B word
Uh-huh.
on the mic. He wanted to be, and that was just a respect that he showed me.
Yeah.
And I, respected guys like him that did that, because everybody came running up to me, Cash said the B word, and he had got it approved. He had came up and asked me if he could say it. And I love the guy to death. I mean, I just think if I had a wrestling show, I want him on it. I just think the world, I think he's phenomenal. My number two is Red Daniels. So I put Red Daniels number two. I don't want to talk about myself, and I did. Just so everybody knows, I didn't put myself on this list,
I got
and
that feeling. So
I didn't want to put myself on there. And I, talking, I was talking to Jerry Travelstead, and I told him. He said, how would you not? I don't like talking. I just don't. I didn't do this company for me, and nothing about me. But what I'm getting at is, when I was in the main event, and overall I drew the most money and had the biggest crowd, and that is, it's not talking about myself, that is something that I've done everywhere. But number two was Red Daniels. He drew the second most money. He had the second biggest crowds when he was in the main event. Red Daniels, to me, I was always, man, I was so mean to him because I thought he could get like Peyton and get to WWE or AEW. I thought he had that because he had charisma.
Mm-hmm.
He had more charisma than majority of anybody that I've ever wrestled with or seen wrestle. He just, you can't teach that. Certain guys just did not have charisma, and they were great workers, great wrestlers. What Dan lacked in wrestling ability or athletic ability, he made up in charisma.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, for Stride and Southern Illinois, people loved him.
Yeah.
Like I have wrestled and I've been everywhere and I've done a lot of cool things in my life, but I've never heard a pop like he got at Strideanniversary. It was insane. We've always talked, we live for that. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that is something that I would hope to God that he still remembers. Like, I mean, I'm getting goosebumps right now thinking about that, but I view wrestling differently. I mean, I watch wrestling documentaries and I cry sometimes because of my love for wrestling, and I see somebody else love it and I remember all that. And
Yeah.
when I think about Dan getting that and having that buried alive match and just how phenomenal that was and that story was, and him wrestling under a mask for a year and telling
Are
that
we letting the
story.
cat out of the bag here?
Yeah, we're letting the cat. I mean, Stride's done, and he sent me a picture of Race Mask the other day.
Oh,
But
really?
like I said, he was just, man, he was phenomenal. I mean, he just and then training. I mean, he trained Savion Ayers, he trained Riser, he trained Will Power. I mean, he trained Galloway, Bug Galloway, or Bug Gallows, and he trained all those guys. And Dalton Anthony. I mean, he was the main guy. I came in and yelled, but he pretty much did all of it. And just for Stride, I felt like I needed somebody not named Heath Hatton because I didn't want to have to focus on my booking. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to put myself in matches with Axe and Roger or Spade or Flood, and I wanted to put myself in matches with those guys and like not worry about the main event or worry that way I could focus on telling stories for other people. And that's what I had envisioned. And when I made Red that guy, man, he took it and he kept it up there. And people paid to see him wrestle, and people came. And just to me, he for as far as Stride in the company, he's number two. He was close to being number one, to be honest, for me, but he was number two.
Well, my number three, we talked about him earlier, but was Riser or is Riser. For all the same reasons you talked about earlier, he just got it. He had the look. Um, I don't know. I think that he, has a lot of potential. I don't know what he's doing nowadays, but I hope that he is able to continue to pursue this because I do think he was one of those guys that really got it and understood it. The only thing I would have maybe changed about him, and let me bounce this off of you. I felt like when he was Riser, he was that minion for Wraith. And then he kind of broke away from that and became a good guy. Why was there never a name change for him?
He had a couple different options that I really liked. He wanted to be like an athlete once, like a honey badger, and like
Mm-hmm.
wear like a Letterman jacket. And I thought that kind of fit him. Unfortunately for Riser, what happened was around the time we were discussing the change,
Mm-hmm.
COVID happened.
Oh, yeah.
And then he lived with his grandparents and he didn't want to come and put them in danger. And he was around them a lot. And then after that, I think like a lot of people, myself included, post COVID, it was just really hard for certain people to get back in the groove of wrestling. And I just think he kind of lost his passion a little bit. But that was the plan. So he was going to be the honey badger. I probably still have the messages between them where we talked about it, and I think that was kind of the plan. And and it just never, like I said, COVID kind of happened, and it never, manifested, and it just, and then I think he just kind of lost interest, and really, I think it was, in all honesty, I think he came just to wrestle for me.
Hmm.
I think it was kind of like you came to announce because you wanted to be loyal to me. And
Hmm.
I think that's kind of, Riser came because I think he felt like he owed something to me. And I'm thankful for, guys like that were just like, they were gonna be loyal to me regardless. And then once I kind of left, I think Riser was just kind of like, I think he just lost his passion for it, and he didn't really care about the name change.
Well, and I have a feeling my number two is your number one, and that is Axe Allward. I love Axe. I when my kids were little, and my oldest now is 23, my middle is 22. They had to have been. It was right after we moved to Southern Illinois, and we've been here almost 20 years. So they were little. We went to a show. It was an AAPW show in West Frankfurt, and Axe and Gaylord were there, and those guys stood out. And I remember the kids were like, because Axe was being Axe, and so we went up to the guardrails, and they mouthed the kids and stuff. We just had a blast, and I remembered from that time, and then of course seeing him at a few other shows before getting to know him in AAPW, and then of course that was all getting to know him. But then with Stride, I just feel like he was the first champion, and I think that surprised a lot of people because it was a four-way, and you and Tony Flood and Frank Wyatt were a part of that. I think everybody thought, not every the people that knew the intricacies of Stride, that you were going to walk out, because I didn't know that night who was coming out as champion. So, um, and then and he's another one of those guys. I think he was always better as a bad guy, and I think he would admit that as well. But the time that you guys teamed together, that was a fun part of Stride as well. You feuded with the DR party that we talked about earlier, and just his stuff with Roger, and teaming up with Roger, and wrestling against Roger, and kind of being that bad guy that would cower down and had a big mouth, and he was with Jay Wellington Beauregard for a while, and I think those two worked together so well. So I think that Axe definitely, at one point, was that face that ran the place, so to speak. And he's got that old school mentality that I love too, and you see it in his matches, you see it in his promos, and then behind the scenes when we would talk, and he was one that I would sit down and talk to from time to time, and just to get his perspective was always fun for me.
Yeah, so Axe was my number one. So this is the honest to God truth. And I swear on everything I can swear on. And I really truly believe this. I think Axe Allward is the greatest wrestler I've ever known.
Mm.
And so I and this, obviously as a kid growing up, my favorite was Triple H. But however, if somebody came to me, if God came to me and said, you could have one more wrestling match against anybody and then you're done, past, present, dead, alive, I would choose Axe.
Mm.
And that's the honest to God truth. I mean, I would choose him over Ric Flair, over Triple H, over Hogan. I mean, I honestly would. I Not only is he an amazing wrestler, he's an amazing human being.
Yes.
My fate. Me and him had an amazing Falls Count Anywhere match that he says is his favorite at West Frankfurt of all time, and we had some really good matches even for AAPW. Um, I'm going to tell you a funny story about Axe. Me and Daniel Eads was going to SICW one time, and I believe we had a blowout. We had to change the tire. Then there was traffic, and then we hit a train. And me and Axe was semi-main,
Mm-hmm.
and we had to do a 15-minute Broadway. That was no, it was 20 minutes. We had to do a 20-minute time limit draw. We're at the train station, and Daniel was working Flash in the main event, and I was working Axe in the semi-main. This is how long we sat in construction. I got in the passenger seat and changed and put on my wrestling gear. I was able to then change and get in the driver's seat, and Daniel Eads changed into his wrestling gear. We got there. As I'm pulling in, Herb Simmons is opening the door, waving me in. I'm coming in. As I'm walking in, I'm rubbing baby oil on me. And didn't stretch, didn't nothing. Axe is waiting by the entrance. His music is playing. I'm walking up. He turns around. They used to email you the booking sheet, so I knew the finish.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm walking up, and Axe goes, "Nice of you to show up," and winks at me, gives me a fist pump, and walks through the curtain. And we had a 20-minute match.
Wow.
That is, and it was one of my favorite matches that I've ever had. And that to me, like, just that to me, that is Axe Allward. That is just, he's able to do that. And another thing I'm going to say about him, I know we're going long, people, but he when I first met him, I was scared of him because you heard all these horror stories about wrestling, and guys would shoot on you and hurt you. And at AEPW, there was two different locker rooms. We had the heel side and the baby, and we came out on separate sides. And Axe was always on the other side with Gaylord, and he was just the top heel, and he looked rough. I mean, he looked like somebody you would see on Sons of Anarchy at a bar that was going to burn your back, or something. And I'd always try to talk to him, and he would always blow me off. And so I had to work with him, and I was legit scared that he was going to beat me up. And we tried to talk before. He was real cold and short, and anyway, then we had a really good match, and he came up to me after, and it was the first conversation we ever had, and he shook my hand, and he said, "You're really effing good." And I looked at him and I said, "Thank you." And he goes, "No, you're really effing good." And he said, "I'm going to ask if I can work with you." And he turned and walked off. And I was like, I thought I made it, because I mean, him and Shane Rich and Livewire were the guys. They were the guys in Southern Illinois. And I was like, oh my God, I have made it. And then we started working together, and then we became friends. And he's just, to me, he is my GOAT. And that is any level of wrestling. To me is he's the greatest of all time. And I just, and so no matter what list, a Stride wrestling list, WWE list, an SITW list, Axe Allward's he's going to be my number one. He is, I get a lot of credit because of the places I've been, and I mean, just not to mark myself, but Mark, I mean, I got to do a lot of really, really cool stuff. I mean, some of my, you're on there, Shane Rich is on there, Axe is on there, Becky Lynch is on there, Adam Pearce is on there. I've got to do a lot of really cool stuff. But to me, there's no comparison between me as a wrestler and Axe as a wrestler. So that's my number one.
Well, my number one was a hard choice, but I did go with a former champion of Stride Pro Wrestling, one of the most handsome, most prolific members of the Stride roster, and that is myself. No, I'm kidding. I went obviously with you because obviously without Heath Hatton, there would have been no Stride Pro Wrestling. And I'm not saying that to suck up, because there's nothing to suck up for anymore, because,
you took all my money.
Yes, exactly. So, but yeah, I mean, and a lot of the people that we asked, and they made lists, and Heath Hatton was number one on a lot of those lists, definitely on all of the lists, and number one on most of them. And I just feel like, without, when you say Stride Pro Wrestling, you always immediately associated it with Heath Hatton. Even when you weren't there, there was that feeling that Heath Hatton was still part of the show. And I know that, you don't always take that kind of compliment, and you're very humble in your approach with everything. But I do think that uh, your willingness to give people opportunity, not only a first opportunity, but there were people that got second and third chances that came back to Stride that maybe uh, a lesser person would not have let them come back, or wanted them to come back. But you always, did what was best for the business and for the storylines, and putting that first and foremost, and then putting schools and churches and youth groups and whatever other events or fundraisers that we could do. Again, like Jerry Travelstead, Heath Hatton is just as philanthropic and wanting to give back and help raise money. And wrestling is a fun and easy way to easy, and the fact that you're not selling a bunch of stuff, but you're able to do that as well. So again, you put the wrestling in Stride Pro Wrestling. I don't know what analogy I'm going for there, but again, without Heath Hatton, we're not here having this podcast talking about Stride Pro Wrestling 7+ years later. So again, thank you for all that you did for not just me, but for guys like Sam Hunter, for guys like Jim Kelton, giving us opportunities to do what we love in an environment, and make new friends along the way. So thank you for that.
Well, I appreciate it. It was, I don't like to talk about myself. I like to talk about things that I've done, because I think they're really cool and interesting. And I think 12-year-old me would want me to be proud of what I've been able to do. Like I said, I'm very happy with what we were able to do at Stride. And you talk about giving people second and third chances. A lot of times stuff was just misunderstanding, and sometimes, like I said, guys have egos, and guys think that they're better than what they are, or and you have to have a little bit of that in wrestling. But sometimes you go somewhere else and you don't get what you want, or and guys would come back around, and they a lot of times they would just make that call, say I'm sorry, I mean, there was a time, me and you had a misunderstanding, and
Mhm.
I think a lot of times I'm an introvert, you're an introvert. Like, I'm not an express my feelings type of guy. I mean, my wife was just telling me last night she was mad I wouldn't dance with her at this thing, and she's like, "You're just such a, you harbor your feelings," and I'm that guy. And but I am very thankful for what I was able to accomplish at Stride, but more not for myself, because I do know the things that I've done and the things I've accomplished. A lot of guys will never get to do, and I am thankful for that. But I'm more thankful for the stories that I was able to tell for other people, and that would be my advice to anybody starting a wrestling company: is if you can keep the boys happy and just have a conversation with them and try to let them tell stories that they want to tell, because that's what it's all about to me. And that'll go a long way. And the money that we were able to raise, over $100,000, I never took a sponsorship
Mhm.
money.
Right.
I had people offer, we had people ask to invest and give us money. And I had somebody one time offer me money, and I directed her to, I had saw somebody posted online they needed a sponsorship for a soccer team,
Mhm.
and I messaged her that I thought she should give the money to them. Um, that's what Stride was. It was a charity. I enjoyed giving, money to other people. I didn't want to take money. I didn't want to make money. You took the money box.
Mhm.
You saw what I did. I never took a dime.
Mhm.
I mean, you saw it. I mean, I never did. I never paid myself. And that's the honest to God truth. Um, I gave to everybody else. If I made more, I gave it to the boys. I didn't. I did Stride for everybody else, and I hope that's the one thing that I'm remembered for, is, or Stride is when they think of me, they they don't remember me as being a good wrestler or amazing wrestler. I know I am. I know I'm probably the greatest wrestler you've ever known. But I hope that they just remember me giving to other people, me being loyal, me being helpful, me giving people an opportunity to live out their dream. And I hope that's what, I'm remembered for, strides remembered for, is giving to other people and not, you know, anything else. There's so many wrestling companies that, that guy's a scumbag, or that guy's a ripoff, or, and I've never been labeled that, and that speaks a lot, to me. And I still got more matches in me, so, look for Hunsperger and Hatton to lock up again and do some stuff. But Stride will have matches here and there, and there's other wrestling companies, guys, go check it out. And that's my top 10 list. If you weren't on it, no hard feelings, like you said. I just want you guys, to know that we're very thankful. Me and you both are very thankful, and Sam Hunter as well. We are all very thankful for you giving us a platform and a place to go and wrestle and put on shows. And to everybody who's bought a ticket, thank you. And to everybody that's wrestled, thank you. It means the world to me and everybody else.
Yep. Couldn't have said it better myself. For Heath Hatton, I am Kevin Hunsperger. Thanks for listening to this week's show, and we will talk again soon.